Congratulations on purchasing your new Intelliquilter. This video is meant as a supplement to the basic training that you received during your installation. It will also be a useful tool to review things you may have forgotten or may not use very often. First, you will see a quick reference index for specific topics, so if you are looking for something specific, you can jump right to it now. I also want to mention here some useful websites for other training videos and support. www.iqdemos.com has videos made by our dealers covering a variety of topics. www.iqpedia.com has a lot of useful links for basic information on the system. www.intelliquilter.com is the main Intelliquilter site with support, updates, and information. www.intelliquilter.zendesk.com is a support forum where you can find troubleshooting for common problems. www.quilttech.com is a place to find extra or replacement parts such as drive wheels. And don't forget our Yahoo Groups forum for general quilting questions and comments. Now let's jump right in and go through the parts of your tablet. This will be a T550 version of the tablet. You will see here in the top right-hand corner that we have 3 small lights. They are labeled. The top light is related to hard drive function, so when your tablet is thinking, that light will be on or flashing. The second and third lights have small pictures of a battery and the number 1 and 2 next to them. This is because this type of tablet has 2 different batteries. The first is the main battery and the second one is a backup for the first. Your tablet also has a coin battery which is internal and may need replacement every few years, but we'll go through that later. When the tablet is charging, as we will see here, one or both of those battery lights will be on. You can see the plug-in area for the power is right here on top. When the tablet is on the machine, it should be charging as well. Now, when we plug the charger in or put the tablet on the machine, we will see the light come on orange to show that it is charging the battery. Once it is fully charged, the light will turn green. The charging cord is attached to your machine but can be detached and used to charge the tablet off the machine as well. It is a standard 2-part cord. You can see the 2 parts here that go into the black box. The green light on the box indicates that the charger is getting power. If you do not see the green light on the box, part of the cord may be unplugged, so check that when attempting to charge off the machine. Let's move back to the tablet now. On the back of the tablet here we see 2 main batteries, the main and the backup. If you need to remove these for any reason, say if your tablet is not booting up, we may ask you to remove the batteries for a few minutes, then replace them. Simply compress the 2 sliders here and slide the battery out. If the batteries do need to be removed, you will need to remove both. This little area here is where the tablet connects to the docking station and how it communicates with the rest of the system. When docking the tablet, you always want to make sure that this connection is secure. If you are having any communication problems, this area not being secure could be the issue. Also, you always want to make sure this area is kept clean and in good condition. Next to the docking station, you can find your tablet model information. The model is listed here, and as you can see, this is a T550 model tablet. On the back, you will also see your stylus holder. The stylus simply slides down into the top of the tablet here and is a great place to keep your stylus when not in use to make sure it doesn't get lost. Along the side here you will see some fan vents, and also this circular area next to it is a fan vent. These fan vents allow the tablet to stay cool but can sometimes get a bit clogged with dust or lint. As part of your regular maintenance, you should clean these vents areas by holding a vacuum up to the holes to suck out accumulation. This should be done about twice a year, or if you feel that your tablet is getting warmer than usual after use. You can also clean the vent area on your docking station in the same way. On the side of the tablet we have 3 slider buttons. The top slider you will see has a little power symbol next to it. This is the tablet's power button. We do not use the functions of the other two buttons, so you don't need to worry about them. To turn your tablet power on, simply slide down the power button and hold for about 5 seconds until you see the blue light. During boot up, you will see a series of screens similar to a computer booting up. It has completed the boot up process when you see the main menu screen. There is some important information here on the main menu. On the very bottom of the screen, you will see what version of the program you are currently running. This is in a date format, as you can see. If your version number is a year or two old, you definitely want to update your software so that you can have all of the newest features. Software updates are provided free for life, so you always want to stay up to date. Software updates can be downloaded from our website, www.intelliquilter.com, and easily loaded onto your tablet. We will cover updating a bit later and go into more detail. In the upper left-hand corner, you will see that the tablet says Demo Mode. This simply means that for some reason the tablet is not currently communicating with the motors. The reason right now is that the tablet is not connected to a machine. Most features are still available in demo mode, but features such as Mark on Quilt or Path Pattern, where you would need to move the machine, will appear in gray, and you will not be able to use them in demo mode. In the upper right-hand corner, the tablet will show if you have low battery and the battery percentage. It will also show in this corner if you have any saved screenshots. If you do have screenshots, it will say snap and a number, the number indicating how many screenshots are saved in the queue waiting for download onto a USB. Speaking of screenshots, let's look up here at the top of the tablet where the screenshot button is found. This small, flat black button that says SAS next to it is your screenshot button. If you would like to take a screenshot or picture of a screen and save to show potential customers, simply press the SAS button when the screen has what you want on it. Taking a screenshot is essentially like taking a picture of the screen. You can then download your screenshots to a USB, take them to your computer and print them out, save them there, email them, or whatever you would like to do with them. We'll talk more about screenshots a little later when we go through the steps. On the top of the tablet again, we see the stylus slot on the left corner. You will also see 2 USB ports here. This is how you communicate with the outside world. You should be able to use any USB with the tablet, but often it is most convenient to use the USB that came with it. This USB has the necessary folders already on it to make certain functions, such as downloading new patterns, a bit easier. Following along, you have a few other ports, but you really won't ever use these ports. Once the tablet has booted, it will come to the main menu. We have already seen that the software version is displayed at the bottom of the screen on the main menu. You can tell what screen you're on by looking at the title here. Now let's explore the options on this screen. First, you have Design Sew Quilt. This is the button you push whenever you want to start designing a new quilt or working with a saved quilt. When you hit the button, you have the options to Start New or Edit Existing. We will talk more about how to design different types of quilts in the next section. Load Design Synchronize is how you load new patterns onto your tablet from your computer. Simply save newly purchased patterns onto your USB that was included with the system. You can use any USB, but the included one already has the Patterns folder on it for you. You must make sure all the patterns you wish to download are in the folder called Patterns. If you are using a different USB, simply create a folder called Patterns on it and put all the patterns inside that folder. The Intelliquilter can read patterns in DXF or IQP format. Once you have the patterns in the Patterns folder on your USB, come to your tablet and hit Load Design Synchronize. Hit the Load option and you will be prompted to insert your USB. Do not put the USB in until prompted. The patterns will automatically download, then you will be prompted to remove the USB. After that, you will have your new patterns on the tablet and be able to use them. The Sync option is used if you have multiple tablets or a stick to share information between the two. Pattern Designer is next. You will see when I hit Pattern Designer that I get a message that the motors are not connected. This is because the tablet is not currently attached to a machine. Pattern Designer can only be used when the tablet is mounted to the machine and allows you to record the movement of the machine and then save the pattern you have created. This is very useful if you have paper patterns you would like to add to the IQ, or if you want to create your own patterns. Simply move the machine along the pattern while in recording mode. Once saved, the recordings can be manipulated and edited in all the same ways a normal pattern can. On the other side of the screen, you will see manual mode listed. Right now, since we are off the machine, you will notice it is in gray. When on the machine, the manual mode button allows you to quickly change from computerized mode to manual mode. Hitting the button lifts the motors so that you can easily add freehand elements. Once finished, simply hit the button prompt and the motors will re-engage and you will be back in computerized mode. Next, we have utilities. There are a lot of options within utilities, many of which are quite important to know about. First, you have library maintenance. This allows you to move, rename, or delete patterns and saved blocks and quilts so that everything is easy to find. Within library maintenance, you have the option to move or clean up, delete individual items or entire catalogs. You have a pattern library, a block library, and a quilt library. Selecting one of these options will take you to the move or clean up options. Once selected, you will be able to move through and select individual items or entire catalogs to move or delete. You also have the option here to archive your libraries, which is recommended to do fairly often. It is a particularly good idea to archive before going through a cleaning or reorganizing session to make sure you don't accidentally lose anything. When you select to archive libraries, you will get the prompt to insert your USB. The IQ will then download all of the information in your current libraries as a backup that you can have on your personal computer. If you lose any information, you can always go back and reload archives by hitting the Reload Libraries and inserting your USB with the latest archive files on it. Clean Rollers is a function that will spin your drive wheels. Those are the small rubber-covered wheels on your motor, so that it is easier to clean them. If you are getting obstruction messages or it seems like the motors are slipping a bit, you will want to use this. Measure Calibrate allows you to calibrate your motors. This should be done if you've had to remove or realign your motors for any reason. It is set at the time of install, but if the motors are ever adjusted, or if things aren't stitching where you think they should be, you can calibrate. There's a great video on the steps for calibrating at www.iqdemos.com. Preferences are the settings on your tablet, and some of them can be changed according to your preference, so let's take a look at those. To change any preference, simply hit the preference, then use the plus/minus buttons here. Really, the only setting here you don't want to change unless we specifically tell you is the obstruction threshold. Engagement strengths should only be changed if you are having obstructions or the motors are slipping or not following the pattern. Videos for setting the correct engagement strengths can be found at www.iqdemos.com. Make sure you are following the correct engagement strength video for your type of motors. For regular motors, you want to set your engagement strength between 8 and 14. For super motors, you want to stay between 3 and 6. The project time display is used if you want to track a particular project you are working on and can be reset using the button below. Back on the Utilities page, the View Print Patterns button allows you to download patterns in a printable format with all of their pertinent information onto your USB. You can then email or print the patterns on your personal computer. When hit, you will select the patterns you want, then be prompted for the USB. The Save Screenshots button allows you to download any screenshots you have taken onto your USB. Remember, the screenshot button is on the top of the tablet, the small black button with SAS next to it. It allows you to essentially take a picture of whatever is on the screen at that point. If you have screenshots waiting to be downloaded, you will see a message saying Snap and a number in the upper right corner of your screen. To download the screenshots, simply press the Save Screenshots button and you will be prompted to insert the USB. They can then be emailed or printed from your personal computer. This is a great way to share something that you have created with clients. The last option on the main menu is System. It is conveniently placed in the corner because you will use this a lot. You must go into System in order to properly shut down your tablet. Other options in System won't be used very often, but can be very important when you do need them. The first option here is Copy Logs to USB. Hopefully you won't need to use this much, but it is an extremely important part of troubleshooting if you experience any problems. Having the logs allows us to see all of your settings, how your motors are moving, and if there are any communication errors. Hopefully your dealer had you copy your logs during the install, but we will go through the process again. Hitting the Copy Logs to USB button will prompt you to insert your USB. After downloading, remove the USB and take it to your personal computer. Go to www.intelliquilter.com and select the Support tab on the left. Fill in the necessary information, and when you come to the Upload Files section, select the first button. This will open a window where you can search for the USB. If you are using the USB that came with the system, it will probably be called Transcend. Find the file named logs.tar.gz and select. It will then be uploaded. If you get a message that the file is too large, you will need to reboot your tablet and download a new set of logs. Don't forget to delete the original file from the USB before downloading the new one. Repeat the process for uploading. Next we have Program Update. Program Update is extremely important because it allows you to run the most current version of the software. Remember, you can check what version you are running by looking on the main menu at the bottom middle of the screen. We provide free updates for life, so there is no reason you shouldn't be up to date. To get your updates, go to www.intelliquilter.com and select the Software Updates tab on the left. You will only need to download the latest version even if you have missed some in between. They are named by date, so the most recent date is the one that you want. Download onto your USB directly onto the USB. The update does not need to be in a folder. Go to Program Update on your tablet and, when prompted, insert your USB. The update will automatically download. Don't forget to read all of the update notes either on the website or at the bottom of the main menu Help for all of the updates you missed. The main menu Help can be reached by simply hitting the question mark button on the main menu screen. Scroll down to the bottom to find the update notes. The Copy System Info to USB allows you to download the help notes, information on patterns, and other information to your USB to be viewed on your personal computer. Again, pressing this will prompt you to insert your USB and the information will be automatically downloaded. Interface Setup Test is important if you are getting any communication errors. When hit, you will see a list of settings. These settings are established at the time of installation and really should not need to be changed unless you move your system to another machine. You may possibly need to change the date a few times in the life of the system, and you can change the motor control sensitivity if you are having bad obstructions. The real part of this page that you will use will be the first button, Communications Test. When you hit the Communications Test button, it will show Interface, X motor, and Y motor. This can be helpful in narrowing down communication errors. The communication test will probably be the only thing you use on this page. Back on the Utilities page, you next have the System Password button. You won't need this very often, but if you ever purchase a stick or another tablet, you will need to know your password. This is a unique ID for your tablet. Last, we come to Shut Down System. Hitting this button allows you to properly shut down the tablet and turn it off. If the tablet ever locks up and you are unable to shut it down using System Shutdown, you can hold down the power switch until it shuts down. This is called a hard shutdown. This should only be used in extreme circumstances when you cannot use the regular shutdown. In every other case, use the System Shutdown button in this screen. You've probably noticed the back arrow button on all of the screens. This back arrow will usually take you back a single screen when pressed. When you are modifying a pattern, be careful to use the Undo button instead of this back button, as you may lose your work if you are in the Modify Patterns screen. I will discuss the Undo button a little later. Another button I have just mentioned, which you will see on every screen, is the question mark Help button. On the main menu, if you scroll to the bottom, the Help button will give you the update notes for every software update. But the Help button does much more than that. Think of the Help button as your user manual, and each different screen is a chapter in the manual. When hitting the Help button, it will give you an explanation of all the options you have on the screen you are currently on. It may also give you tips for ideal settings. Use this button whenever you are unsure of what a button on that screen you are on will do. Next, we're going to examine how to set up a pantograph pattern using the Intelliquilter. First, you're going to select Design, Sew Quilt, and then Start New. This will be the way you start any new quilt. Since we are going to examine the pantograph first, go ahead and select Pantograph. You will see that the options Mark on Quilt and Trace on Quilt are not currently available, as the tablet is not mounted on the machine. These methods of defining your stitching area require you to move the machine to define your area, which we cannot do when we are not attached to the machine. These options are therefore currently disabled. I can enter a rectangle manually when off the machine, so we will go ahead and use that option for setting our stitching area. You now have the option to set the height and width of your desired stitching area. We'll go ahead and select a 10 by 10 block. When you have entered your desired dimensions, go ahead and hit Continue. You now have the option to make any adjustments to your block if you would like to, or if it is as desired, hit Finished. Now you have the option to select the pattern or patterns you would like to fit into the block or stitching area you have created. You will see your pattern catalogs organized by name, and when you select a catalog, you will see all the patterns contained within it. Use the scroll to move up and down. When selecting a pattern for a pantograph, you want to select a pattern that can be cleanly connected on both sides, such as this pattern here. This pattern, for example, would not work as a pantograph pattern because it cannot connect. If you try to select a pattern like this when in Panto mode, you will see a message appear, "Not a Panto pattern." For pantographs, you have the option to select a different pattern for odd and even rows, as you can see on the prompt here. First, you will select the pattern for odd rows, then hit Continue. Now you can select a pattern for even rows. This can be the same pattern as you selected for odd rows, or a different pattern. When you have made your selection, hit Continue again. It will always bring in a pattern in the most ideal size to fit within your block, but keeping the ideal ratio that it was designed to have. This next screen allows you to manipulate the size and orientation of that pattern to suit your needs. Our first option is row and pattern height. With this, we can change the height of each row of the pattern to get more or fewer repeats into our stitching block. You can use the plus or minus sign here to manipulate the patterns. Gap is the distance between the odd and even rows. As you lower the gap, the rows get closer. As you raise it, they will get further away. The offset option will take all odd rows and shift them to the side. An option under offset is the offset 50%. Shift will move just the odd rows up or down. While offset and shift affect only the odd rows, you do have the option to flip X or Y for both odd and even rows, as you can see here. The first set of flips affects the odd rows, the second set of flips affects the even rows. The skew option allows you to stretch or compress all of the pattern to fit within your stitching area. The last option on this screen is clip. Setting clip will give you only full repeats of a pattern. This can be helpful if you want to cleanly stitch out multiple rows. With clip on, you don't have the small bits and pieces of the pattern along the edge that may be hard to get rid of, or may require jump stitches otherwise. When you are done with all your adjustments, select Finished. You now have the option to select your transition types. If you have any transitions in your stitching, they will appear in pink, and it will give the number of necessary jump stitches here. You may select to have those jump stitches performed as jump stitches, or by using the up and down arrows, you can have the machine tie off so you can cut threads at the transitions or continuously sew those transitions. Since on this pattern we don't have any jump stitches, it does not matter what transition type we select. Once you are okay with the transition type, select Accept. At this point, it will ask you if you want to commit to this transition type, as you will not be able to go back and change it. The system attempts at a few integral points to make sure that you want to do things that may not later be reversible. This is a safety mechanism for you. At this point, we come to a screen where we can add or go back and edit an existing pattern, add or edit a block, go into Utilities, sew our quilt, realign our quilt, or save our quilt. It is a good idea at this time to go ahead and save your work in case something were later to happen to it. I will discuss saving our work in more detail a bit later. Now let's look at another type of pattern that you can use, the block pattern. Unlike a pantograph pattern, block patterns do not repeat. A block pattern will be a single pattern just like what you see in the pattern selector library. You may use any type of pattern as a block pattern. You are not restricted like you are when selecting a pantograph. To create a block pattern, we will again go through the steps of creating a block. Since we have already seen this once, this might be a good opportunity for you to try and follow along. We are again here at the main menu. What do we push to begin designing our quilt? Design, Sew Quilt. Next, we select Start New, and then Block Pattern. You can see how step-by-step the procedure is, and if you take the time to read the screen, it is usually quite easy to figure out what the next step is. Now we are ready to define our stitching area, or block. But let me just talk a little bit about the other options. Mark on Quilt allows you to define the space right on your quilt where you want to stitch. Define the area by moving your machine along the quilt and selecting the corner points of a square, rectangle, hexagon, or whatever type of shape you need. You can pick as many points as you want, and when you come to the last point, you can automatically connect to make sure your block is enclosed. Just follow the prompts on the screen. The Trace on Quilt option is similar to Mark on Quilt, but it allows you more freedom in defining the area. For Trace on Quilt, you move your machine and actually trace the whole area out. This can be useful if you want a wavy or very odd-shaped outline, or if you want to follow along something like an applique. Mark on Quilt will connect your points with a straight line, so if you want a more curved outline, use the Trace on Quilt option. Again, we will select Enter Rectangle manually this time, since I am not on the machine. So let's go back to the Enter Rectangle manually option. Once we select it, we then have to define our area size. We simply enter the dimensions and hit Enter after each. When we are finished, we hit Continue. You now will come to a screen where you can make adjustments to your block if needed. Usually you won't need to make any adjustments, so just hit Finish. Now you can select your pattern to fit into the block you just created. Move through the pattern library to find the desired pattern and hit Finished. Now we come to the editing screen for blocks. Again, the pattern will be brought into your block to fit the best and keep the ideal size that it was designed in. This could cause odd things to happen, like the pattern being sideways. Don't worry though, because we can make adjustments to place that pattern however we want in that block. You will see that this editing screen is quite different than the one for pantographs, but that is because we are now manipulating a single pattern instead of rows of patterns. Essentially though, the manipulations are the same, with a few bonus features for the block patterns. So let's see what we can do here in the way of editing. We can adjust just the width of the pattern. Again, this is done by either using the plus/minus button or by using your finger or stylus on the screen. Remember, you must select what tool you want to use before making any adjustments. Next, we can adjust just the height of the pattern. If you want to keep the size ratio of the pattern but make it smaller or larger, use the scale tool here. Rotation will allow you to rotate the pattern to any angle. You can also use flip X or flip Y to rotate 180 degrees. Move allows you to pick up the entire pattern and move it anywhere within the block or even outside of your block. Remember that once you start manipulating the pattern, it can go outside of the block that you have defined. If you want it to stay within that area, keep it within the block. The Start End option allows you to move the start and end points. This can be useful in connecting patterns cleanly. If you have a continuous pattern where the start and end points are the same, you can actually move the start and end points to any part in the pattern. If you have a non-continuous pattern, such as this one, you may only swap the start and end points. The Stretch feature allows you to select an anchor point, then stretch the pattern out from that point. The anchor point must be one of the green boxes. Your stretch point must also be a green box. Here I also want to point out the Undo button. This will appear when you're making edits and allows you to back out of the last few edits you have made if you decide you don't like something. You will see the number of edits you can back out of listed as a number next to Undo. There are a finite number of backouts available, so don't do too much before hitting Undo. Also, if you select a different editing tool, the previous edits may become locked. When making edits to a pattern, you may want to zoom into a particular area to see it in more detail and move about the screen while you are working. You can do all of this by using the zoom bar located in the gray ribbon area. To see the full zoom toolbar, simply hit the Zoom On/Off button here. You have the option to zoom a percentage, true size, or zoom in or out. To zoom in, hit Zoom In, then select the area on the screen where you want to zoom in. The zoom setting will remain until zoom is turned off or if you select another zoom setting. So to stop zooming, simply hit Zoom Off. The same with Zoom Out. Turn Zoom On, select Zoom Out, then when you are finished, select Zoom Off. You also have the option to lock the zoom by hitting the Zoom Lock button. Once it is on, you will see a small lock on the Zoom On/Off button. This will allow you to stay zoomed in when changing screens or making changes to the pattern. Zoom Lock will hold the zoom for most screens, but not all of them. To turn Zoom Lock off, simply hit it again, and you will see the lock disappear. Pan allows you to shift your view area. Along with the zooming features in this ribbon area, you also have the option to have a visible grid. This can help you if you want to figure out exactly what size a pattern or area you're working on is. To turn the grid on, simply hit the Grid On/Off button. You can then adjust the size of your grid blocks by hitting the next button, which will show the size of the square blocks in relation to the pattern. Your options are 1 inch, a ½ inch, and a ¼ inch. You can change the size by simply hitting the button here. You may use the zoom tools with the grid on, and the grid will remain the same size in relation to the pattern as you zoom. In other words, the grid is always true to the pattern no matter what zoom mode you are in. You will see some small arrows here on the editing screen, which means there are more options available. Hitting this will take you to the higher level editing options. These are the Magnet tool, Shape Shift, and Distort. Here is where the Undo button really comes in handy, as these are very fine adjustments that often require a little bit of playing with to get perfect. The Magnet tool allows you to attract or repel a portion of the pattern. You can select the power and speed of the magnet to make larger or smaller adjustments. You can also select whether you want the area automatically smoothed or not. Shapeshift is similar to Stretch, but does not specify a necessary anchor point. You may pull out at any area of the pattern with Shapeshift. Distort allows you to pull out at the corners. When finished with this screen, you may select Finished or go back to the main editing screen by hitting the small arrows again. When we are finished editing our pattern, we come to yet another editing screen, allowing us to add a new pattern to our block, go back and modify a pattern in our block, copy a pattern, delete a pattern, repeat a pattern, combine patterns, split a pattern, or smooth a pattern. Let's just quickly go through some of these. If you select to add a new pattern, you'll be given an option of what type of pattern you wish to add: block, panto, line. And then we'll be taken back to the pattern library to select your pattern. From there, the steps are the same to edit that new pattern. Copying a pattern will simply make a copy of the original, which you can then move and manipulate separately. Repeating a pattern will give you repeats in the X or Y direction. You set how many repeats you want here. Delete is pretty simple. You just select the pattern to delete. Combine, split, and smooth are a bit trickier, but can really help eliminate jump stitches and make stitching a lot cleaner and faster. To combine two patterns, you may want to play with the start and end points before going to combine. You will have the option to swap in combine, but if it is a movable start end point, you will no longer be able to move it to any location. Once you select combine, simply follow the prompts to select the patterns you wish to combine. You may combine as many patterns as you want. Once finished, select how you would like any transitions to be stitched and hit finished. To split patterns, you must select the point at which you want to split. Be sure to zoom in here so you get the exact spot that you want. You will see the separate patterns highlighted in different colors. When you have the desired point, hit the split button. You will see the new start and end points appear. If you then want to delete a split off section, hit delete pattern, then highlight the pattern you want to delete. You also have the options to copy, modify, or combine patterns from this screen. To smooth a pattern, first select the pattern you wish to work with. You will then see the prompt to drag the start endpoints on the screen over the section you wish to smooth. The area will be highlighted. Increase or decrease the smooth percentage. You can also adjust the sharpness of points here. When you have the desired settings, hit smooth to lock the changes in. You will see the adjustments highlighted. At this point, you may be a bit overwhelmed by the number of options when editing. Remember though, I have gone through every single possible option for editing a pattern here. You will never have to go through every single editing tool on a single pattern. Often you will select your pattern, make maybe one or two small adjustments to it, and then be ready to sew. Once we are finished with the pattern editing, we come to the screen where we can go back and add another pattern, add another block, save our work, realign the quilt, or sew our quilt. Remember, this is a great time to save your work before moving on. Once you hit the sew quilts, you will sequence your stitching and then be ready to stitch. This is a good time to talk about saving your quilt. How exactly do you save your quilt? When you've completed editing a pattern, selecting Finish will take you to the Add Edit Pattern screen as we've seen before. Selecting Finished on this screen will take you to the Design Sew Quilt screen, where you have the options to begin sewing, to go back and edit, or to save your work. This is the ideal place to save your work. When we hit the Save Quilt Pattern button, it will ask what you want to save from what you have been working on. You can save a block, say if you've created your block using trace for an odd-shaped area and you want to be able to use that block shape again. You can save a pattern that you have been modifying, or you can save the entire quilt, which will save your blocks, patterns, and the arrangement of everything. Share the quilt and export a pattern will allow you to download your work onto your USB and save on your computer. Each type of saving will work the same way, so let's select Save the Quilt. It will ask you to name your quilt. First, delete the existing name, then type the name you want to use using the keyboard. Hit Enter when you have your name correct. Now it will ask you to select a destination catalog. You can select an existing catalog or create a new one. You will see I have animals, which I created earlier. Once you select your catalog, the quilt will be saved there, and you can go back and retrieve and work on it again at any time. Once you have completed all of your editing and have passed the editing pages to get to the Design Sew Quilt screen, you can begin sewing by hitting the Sew Quilt button. Here it will ask you to sequence your stitching and select exactly what you want to stitch. Select the patterns that you would like to stitch, sequence your stitching, and this brings you to the Sew Quilt screen. Let's review the options that you have on the Sew Quilt screen. Speed and detail should be close to each other or the same. Speed is the speed at which your machine will go on straight portions of a pattern. Detail is the speed at which the machine will go on directional change areas of the pattern. Lower speed and details are necessary for smaller or more intricate patterns. Test to find the ideal settings when working with unfamiliar patterns. Dwell, found in the gray bar, is also unique to each pattern. Dwell allows the machine to slow at points in the pattern so that the points can be cleanly stitched out. To see the points where dwell will impact the pattern, press Hide, Show DP. We also have the zoom and grid options on the Sew Quilt screen here. We have talked about those earlier. Hitting the Adjust button will take you to a new screen. Here we can make adjustments in case our quilt has some shrinkage or measurements were off a bit, so that our pattern can fully fill the necessary area. There are two modes in the Adjust screen, Tweak and Clip. You can change between the modes by highlighting the mode button and hitting the plus or minus button. Let's examine Tweak first. You will see dashed lines across your screen when in Adjust mode. These lines are what you use to make your necessary adjustments. Tweak will stretch or compress the affected pattern or patterns to fit into the area that you define by moving the dashed line. You will not lose any of your pattern in Tweak mode. The existing pattern is simply stretched or compressed. Clip mode allows you to cut a portion of the pattern or patterns off to fit it in your stitching area. Because this may affect the number or position of jump stitches needed, you also have an option to select your transition type here. The Realign button should be used if there is no longer a needle reference point. For example, if you have shut down your tablet and not saved your needle position, or if you have rolled your quilt and are stitching new rows, or if you're starting work on a new block, or if you need to go back and fix stitching. When Realigned is used, the machine will ask you to select the reference point. You will then move your needle to the selected reference point and it will begin stitching from that reference point you have given it. Restart is used when you do have a needle reference point. For example, if you have saved your needle position, if you've had an obstruction, a bobbin change, or a thread break. The machine knows where it is in the pattern and where stitching has stopped. So all you have to do is bring the needle to where the stitching has stopped or the correct point in the pattern shown on the screen. You will see when you hit Restart that it asks you to bring your needle to the restart location. That location is shown on the screen. Once you move your needle to that location, simply hit OK. Sometimes it is a bit confusing to know when to use Realign or Restart, but just ask yourself, do I have a needle reference or not? If you have moved the quilt or moved to a different section of the quilt, you do not have a needle reference point. If the machine thinks it has been stitching and is further along in the pattern than the actual stitching, you do not have a needle reference point. In these cases, you would use Realign. If the crosshairs on the screen show the proper place in the pattern where stitching ended, and you have not moved your quilt, then you do have a needle reference point and can use Restart. It doesn't matter if you have moved your machine, just if you have moved the quilt itself. When stitching from the Sew Quilt screen, whether you are starting a new pattern, realigning, or restarting, the machine will always take a single stitch at the beginning of stitching and prompt you to pick up your bobbin thread. At that point, when you are ready to begin, simply hit the Start button and it will begin stitching. You may pause stitching at any point by hitting the Pause button. One more thing you may see on the Sew Quilt screen while it is actually stitching is the Hide Show Trace button and the gray ribbon. This is part of the motor movement monitoring, which allows you to compare the actual movement of your machine with the pattern ideal. This can be a very helpful feature in figuring out ideal settings for a pattern. To see the trace, you must have motor movement monitoring turned on. It can be found by going from the main menu to Utilities, then Preferences. It is the last option in Preferences. When Trace is on, you will see a dark blue line indicating your actual machine movement. If it does not line up with the pattern, you may want to make some changes to your speed, details, or dwell settings. If it still does not follow, you may need to increase your motor engagement strength for the motor that is not following, or check your motor alignment. For instructions on how to do motor alignment, go to www.Intelliquilter.com and click the Search Support tab, then type in Motor Alignment. For videos on setting engagement strength, go to www.iqdemos.com and look under Engagement Strength. Make sure you are following the correct video for your type of motors. Now that we have the basics down, let's try to combine a few things to create a border. There is no one right way to create a border, just the way you prefer. The main ways of simply creating a border are the use of pantographs, duplicating and combining a pattern, and using line pattern. I will briefly cover each method. Creating a quilt map prior to placing your border patterns can be extremely helpful. You can find videos on creating quilt maps on www.iqdemos.com. If you would like to use a pantograph to create your border, simply define your border area and insert your desired pantograph pattern. Now, we will modify our pantograph so that we have only a single line represented that stretches across our border area. For the corner, you may want to insert the same pattern as a block pattern, then manipulate it to fit into the corner, then combine the pantographs and the blocks to enclose your border. If you have a matching corner pattern, that is usually the easiest way to match ends. You can also use the X-Y repeat feature and combine the individual patterns to create a border. You may have to play with the start and end points to get clean stitching between the individual patterns. Line or path patterns, if you have this feature, can be useful for creating borders. Again, define your border area, then choose line pattern if you want a straight pattern, or path pattern if you want to define a path that is not a straight line between the 2 points. You must have your tablet on the machine to define your line or path pattern. Move your machine to define the path, selecting points along the way to define repeats of the pattern. You can find videos for more in-depth discussions of line and path patterns at www.iqdemos.com. It's important to know the parts that have been added to your machine. There are 4 main parts that the Intelliquilter adds. There's the tablet, which we've already discussed, the docking station, the motors that move your machine, and last, the wiring harness that connects everything and allows each part to interact and communicate. Since we've already talked about the tablet, let's now look at the docking station. The docking station is attached to the front of your machine. You'll see here the connection port that allows communication between the docking station and the other parts of the system with your tablet. You always want to make sure that the connection between the tablet and the docking station is secure, so you may want to push your tablet in when mounting it onto the docking station. Remember to always use the clamps as well to keep the connection secure and keep your tablet from vibrating too much. You also want to regularly inspect this connection port on your docking station as well as the connection on your tablet to make sure that they're in good condition and clean at all times. On the back of your docking station, you'll see 2 yellow screws here and here that allow you to tilt or move your tablet up or down. This is set at the time of installation and shouldn't need changed, but in case you do want to change the tilt or height of your tablet for better comfort, You can do that using these yellow screws. On the back of the docking station, you'll also see where the power connects here. If you're having trouble with your tablet charging when it's on your machine, you may want to check to make sure this power connection is secure. You'll also see what we call the interface card here. This is the brains that allows everything to communicate. You'll see various connections that go into this interface board. The phone connector communicates with the thread break sensor, which we'll talk about next. There's also a 2-pin green connector and a 6-pin green connector. These allow communication with the motors as well as more power. Now let's go to the top of your machine and talk about the thread break detector. The thread break detector is mounted to the top of your machine and the thread runs through it. Basically what it does is it senses the tension of the upper thread, and if it ever senses a release of that tension, it will give you a thread break detection alert. It's very important that your thread be threaded properly through the thread break detector for it to work properly. For different types of thread, you may have to try winding it up to 3 times around the thread break detection wheel. Just depends on the type and slickness and weight of the thread. You may have to test a little bit when using a different type of thread. Phone connector here that connects into the thread break detector, which also goes back to the interface card on the back of your docking station. If your thread break detector starts giving false thread break errors, there is a troubleshoot you can find on www.intelliquilter.com. It is also possible to work with the thread break detector disconnected. This means just unplugging the phone connector on both ends. If you are having trouble and need to finish something, so you can work with the thread break detector unhooked, but it will not detect any thread breaks if you have them. Moving along, let's follow the large gray wire, which is the wiring harness, from your interface card on the back of your docking station. We'll follow it along your machine and you'll see that we come to a black box. This is a junction box and it should be labeled. You'll see the different junctions, your X and Y motors, power, and you'll see the labels here. If you look underneath the junction box, it's probably attached to your machine, but if you look at the inside of it, you'll see 4 connectors, and these are the connectors of the branches of your wiring harness. We'll follow along further past the junction box, and you'll see that the wiring harness branches off to each motor, your X motor and your Y motor. It is connected with a red 4-pin connector to each motor. We'll talk about the motors a little bit later. Keep following along your wiring harness, that large gray wire, and you'll see it comes to a silver box that has holes in it. This is your power box. This allows the transfer of your power to each part of the machine and the system. So your power box, you always want to make sure that these connections on the front are always secure. They should stay secure because it has a block covering it to keep them secure. There's a green light on your power box that can tell you whether or not that power box is receiving power. And if you follow along, the last part is your power cord. Remember that your power cord can be disconnected and used separately to charge the tablet off the machine. So let's look at the motors. You'll have 2 motors on your machine. When the covers are off, they look like this. There is an X motor and a Y motor. These 2 small motors are what move the machine around while it's stitching in computerized mode. You have one motor that moves side to side, the X motor, and one that moves the machine forward and back, the Y motor. The motors are attached to your machine with adjustable brackets such as these. The motor brackets may look different depending on what type of machine you have, but they'll all have these 4 screws that make them adjustable here. This is how you can tilt, raise, or lower the motors. Your motor is adjusted at the time of installation to perform at optimal levels, so unless something happens that would shift the motor or machine on the track, you should not have to make adjustments to these brackets. If you think adjustments need to be made, contact your dealer for alignment instructions or go to www.Intelliquilter.com and search for motor alignment. The motor is attached to the bracket with 2 screws here, and it's attached in this way. If you ever have to remove your motor for any reason, such as replacing a drive wheel, you'll simply remove those 2 screws and take it away from the bracket. This way you don't have to readjust. You shouldn't have to readjust after putting the motor back on. When it is properly installed, you will see the 2 wheels underneath aligned to the center of your rail and at a 90-degree angle to that rail. That is to say, when it hits the rail, it's even and straight. Here are the 2 wheels, sensor wheel and a drive wheel. Your sensor wheel will look a little bit different. It should be plastic. But when it's on the track, it should be in the center of the track, and it should be nice and straight, running evenly on the track with both of those wheels making full contact onto the track. Let's take a look at the wheels. The first wheel is covered in rubber and is called the drive wheel. This drive wheel usually lasts 2 to 3 years, and actually yours will be fully covered in rubber. This would be covered in rubber as well. Usually lasts between 2 to 3 years. With recent upgrades on it, it may last a bit longer, but it does need to be regularly changed out, just like the tires on a car. And you can see on the shaft here, right there is a little set screw that can be removed to change the wheel out. If you go to Main Menus, Utilities, you may remember that you have the Clean Drive Wheels option. This will spin your drive wheel, allowing you to more easily clean it. And you do need to keep this drive wheel very clean. Clean it regularly, as this is what controls the movement of the motor. So it does need to have very good traction. Engagement strength also affects the drive wheel. That's how hard that it's pushing down onto the drive wheel. So if you notice that your drive wheel isn't lasting as long as you think it should, you may need to reduce your engagement strength, and that should help your drive wheel last. When your motors are properly aligned, the drive wheel should be about a credit card height above the track when the machine is in manual mode. It should be in contact with the track when in computerized mode, and should spin evenly and easily as you move it along the track. This wheel raises to disengage from the track when you're in manual mode, allowing you to easily move your machine around. When you go back into computerized mode, the drive wheel will lower and engage with the track. As I mentioned before, the drive wheel is a wear part and will have to be replaced every 2 to 5 years depending on use. Replacement drive wheels can be purchased. This version is called rubber clad. Instructions on changing the drive wheel can be found on www.Intelliquilter.com by searching for drive wheel replacement. The second wheel here should be made of plastic for you. This wheel is called the sensor wheel, and it senses the position of the machine so that the tablet knows where the machine is at. So as it rolls, it tells the machine where on the track the machine is located. Again, this wheel should be in the center of the track and at a 90-degree angle, hitting the track nice and straight, and should roll smoothly as you roll your machine across, even in manual mode. The sensor wheel should always make contact with the rail, whether you are in manual or computerized mode. Another aspect of the sensor wheel is the amount of pressure being placed on it. If you look above the wheel, you'll see a small screw here, and this is called the limiting screw. This screw should be raised about 1/10 of an inch from the block here, even when you are in manual mode. And again, you'll see as I put pressure, I'm just squeezing on that sensor wheel. That's what raises this limiting screw. If the limiting screw is not raised 1/10 of an inch when in manual mode, you may need to adjust your bracket here to lower your motor down, thus putting more pressure on the sensor wheel and pushing the limiting screw up. The sensor wheel is attached to a spring, as you can see, so the proper pressure must be applied for it to work properly. On the top of the motor, you'll see the belt here and the pulleys here, and the connection area of the wiring harness here. There will be a red connector that goes onto these connections, which allows the motor to communicate with the rest of the system. The lights here will light up if your motor is getting power. And I just want to mention the belt and pulleys. These will move as the motor is moving. The brass colored one, you can tell one of them is brass colored, the other one is just gray. The brass colored one is important as it is connected to the lift motor that engages and disengages the motor. Sometimes this brass bolt can come out of its block here and just needs to be screwed back in. But if we ever talk about the brass bolt, it's this brass colored bolt here that one of the pulleys is attached to. Routine maintenance is very important to keep your Intelliquilter running smoothly and at optimal levels. It can also help you to extend the life of your system. Routine maintenance includes cleaning the tracks and all of the wheels, your machine wheels, and your drive and sensor wheels on the motor regularly. This should probably be done every time you use your machine. To make it easier to clean your drive wheels, remember those are the rubber covered wheels, you can go to Main Menu, Utilities, and hit Clean Drive Rollers. This will allow the drive wheels to spin so that you can easily clean them. Regularly shut down and remove your tablet from the machine when not in use. Allow your tablet to cool before putting it away. Clean your tablet screen with the soft cloth that was provided with your system to keep it clean and free from fingerprints. Replace the drive wheels every 2 to 5 years, or if they show any damage or peeling of the rubber or flat spots. Remember, there's a set screw on the shaft of the drive wheel where you can easily remove it and replace. You may need to replace your coin battery every 5 or so years. This is found on the inside of your tablet. Remember to regularly archive your tablet. To archive, go to Main Menu, Utilities, Library Maintenance, and Archive Libraries. This will give you a backup of all of your information, patterns, and files on your tablet so that you can have that as a backup on your personal computer. And if you ever lose or accidentally delete something, you can just reload your archive and have it back. Along with archiving, library maintenance is important to delete old files that aren't needed or aren't in use any longer. This will keep your tablet running faster and keep extra patterns that you don't need from clogging up your files and library. One last thing that you can do is to regularly, about once a month, allow the tablet battery to completely drain and then fully recharge it off the machine. Remember, your power cord is removable from your machine and your tablet can be charged separately. This will give your battery more life. I hope this video has been helpful in introducing the basics of your new Intelliquilter. This video is not meant to cover everything that the Intelliquilter can do. It can do much more. This is meant just to cover the basics. For more in-depth procedures and videos, see at iqdemos.com. Remember the other resources listed here are also great for learning new things or if you have questions. And don't be afraid to use the question mark help button on the screens if you're not sure what anything does. One of the most important things to remember with the Intelliquilter is to slow down and read the prompts as you go along, as it is very step by step. Also, don't be afraid to play with it and try new things. This is the best way to learn how functions will work, is to try them out.